Desperation. Is it the ultimate bitter end of a man? Or is it the exact violent moment a true ruler is born?
Most people believe desperation is a death sentence. They think when you are hunted, stripped of your title, and forced into the shadows, the game is already over. But history reveals a far darker truth. Desperation is the only fire hot enough to burn away human weakness, leaving behind nothing but pure, unadulterated resolve.
Centuries before medieval kings waged war in the freezing mud of Western Europe, the legendary Chinese military strategist Sun Tzu etched a timeless law of human nature into the art of war. Victory is reserved for those who are willing to pay its price.
Sun Tzu was not talking about a price paid in gold, titles, or vast lands. The true price of victory is measured in total isolation, bitter betrayal, physical agony, and the terrifying willingness to walk straight into the abyss when everyone else around you surrenders.
Now, step back with me over 700 years into the cold, blood-soaked mud of 1306. I want to introduce you to a man who paid that exact price in full, down to the last drop of his blood, Robert the Bruce.
In the freezing winter of 1306, Robert took a desperate gamble and crowned himself King of Scots at Scone Abbey. But he did not inherit a peaceful kingdom. He inherited the ruthless fury of the most terrifying empire on earth at the time, Edward I's England, known as the Hammer of the Scots. Within a few short months, Bruce was not ruling from a golden throne. He was a crowned fugitive, fleeing for his life into the wild, unforgiving mountains.
Sun Tzu once wrote a legendary rule for commanders. Place your army in a deadly position and they will survive. Plunge them into desperate ground and they will live. Robert the Bruce was about to test Sun Tzu's concept of death ground, not as a clever tactical choice, but as a brutal, unavoidable fate.
The English crown struck back with unmatched, systematic brutality. 3 of Robert's brothers were captured, drawn and quartered. His wife and young daughter were dragged away in chains and thrown into dungeons. His sister was hung inside a wooden cage outside the stone walls of Roxburgh Castle, exposed to the freezing weather for 3 brutal years. The price Sun Tzu spoke of was no longer a theoretical lesson. It was a personal nightmare written in his family's blood.
Defeated in 6 consecutive battles, hunted like a wild animal by English warhounds, Bruce was forced to retreat to a desolate, windswept cave on a remote island off the coast of Ireland. Stripped of his army, his nobility, his family, and his crown, he sat in absolute darkness, facing the ultimate psychological monster, complete, irreversible ruin.
Historical legend says that inside that cold cavern, Robert sat watching a tiny spider attempting to spin its web across a wide gap in the stone ceiling. 6 times the spider swung, 6 times it slipped and fell into the dirt. But on its 7th desperate attempt, the thread held, bridging the gap. Sitting in the dark, Bruce realized the profound psychological truth hidden in Sun Tzu's doctrine. Failure is not the opposite of victory. It is the raw, excruciating material required to purchase it.
When Bruce finally emerged from that cave in the spring of 1307, he was no longer a feudal nobleman fighting by honourable chivalric rules. He had transformed into Sun Tzu's living ghost. Let your plans be dark and impenetrable as night, and when you move, fall like a thunderbolt. He abandoned open battles and launched a ruthless campaign of guerrilla warfare, striking English outposts from the thick mountain fog and vanishing back into the shadows before the enemy could even draw their swords. Sun Tzu famously wrote, "Knowing the place and the time of the battle, we may join battle from a distance of 1,000 miles." Bruce knew he could never match the massive English war machine in a traditional open field, so he adopted a scorched earth policy. He dismantled his own captured castles so the enemy could not hold them, destroyed the supply routes, starved the invading armies, and forced the English to march into terrain carefully chosen by him. By June 1314, the conflict reached its inevitable, dramatic climax. At the marshlands of Bannockburn, the English crown assembled a terrifying force of 25,000 heavy cavalry and elite archers to crush the Scottish rebellion forever. Robert stood waiting with only 6,000 lightly armoured men. On paper, the odds were impossible. But as Sun Tzu instructed, in war, the way is to avoid what is strong and to strike at what is weak.
Before the main battle even began, an English knight named Sir Henry de Bohun spotted Bruce riding alone in front of the Scottish line on a small pony. Lowering his heavy lance, the knight spurred his massive armoured warhorse into a full, unstoppable charge to end the war in a single second. Bruce stood completely still. At the final millisecond, he sidestepped his pony, dodged the lance, stood up in his stirrups, and brought his battle axe down with such terrifying force that he split the knight's steel helmet and skull clean in two.
That single blow shattered English morale, but the real trap was yet to spring. Bruce had spent years studying every foot of the landscape. He funneled the vast English cavalry into a narrow bottleneck between a deep river and a muddy marsh, planting hidden pits filled with wooden spikes. The massive English army was trapped by its own size. Sun Tzu's doctrine was executed to perfection. He who knows when he can fight and when he cannot will be victorious.
As the trapped English cavalry fell into the mud and drowned under the weight of their own armour, absolute panic spread like wildfire through their ranks. The mightiest medieval empire in Europe collapsed on the field, not because they lacked military power, but because they had been lured into a death trap engineered by a man who had survived Deathground.
Against every mathematical probability and historical expectation, the Scots achieved a decisive, legendary triumph. Robert the Bruce secured Scottish independence and earned his kingdom. The broken man who had once been hunted in a dark cave became recognised as one of the greatest military strategists in human history.
Sun Tzu's ancient Chinese philosophy and Robert the Bruce's blood-stained journey converge on one undeniable law of human existence. You can never hope to conquer the world around you until you first conquer your own internal impulse to give up when everything burns to ash.
Now look at your own life. We all face our own version of the English army. We all find ourselves isolated inside our own dark cave at some point, facing catastrophic defeat, betrayal, or crushed ambitions. The question is never whether life will force you onto Deathground. The real question is, what kind of monster will you become when you are forced to fight your way out?
Sun Tzu provided the timeless strategy. Robert the Bruce proved the excruciating cost. So I leave you with one question today. What is the exact price you are currently avoiding to pay for the victory you claim you want? Drop your thoughts in the comments below and hit subscribe to join us for more deep dives into the dark psychology of power and history.